In the vibrant city of Lagos, Nigeria, there was a well-known orphanage famous for raising remarkable children. Among those children was a 12-year-old girl named Adoni. She had lived there all her life, having been abandoned as a baby by her mother. One day, as the children of the orphanage gathered outside to play, a black wagon pulled into the driveway. A woman stepped out of the car and headed inside to speak with the matron. A few minutes later, the matron came out with the woman and they walked toward the car. The woman opened the car door and signaled for someone to step out, and slowly, a little girl about 9 years old emerged. Her eyes were swollen like she had been crying for a long time, and she looked completely exhausted, as if the weight of the world rested on her small shoulders. The woman who brought her tried to comfort her, but the girl pulled back, screaming. The matron also attempted to approach her, but the girl reacted the same way. In a burst of panic, the girl ran toward the gate, desperate to escape. "Leave me alone," she cried out as she walked. "I'm going to find my parents." Immediately, the matron and the woman ran after her, trying to stop her from leaving the compound. Realizing they were chasing her, the girl began to run as fast as she could, but the security guard blocked her path. The commotion drew the attention of the other children, who stopped playing to watch. The girl, on the other hand, realized she was trapped, so she paused for a moment and scanned the crowd, searching for someone who could help her. Suddenly, her eyes locked onto Adoni. She did not know why, but something about Adoni made her feel a strong connection. With the last bit of strength she had, she ran to Adoni and hugged her tightly. "Please, don't let me go. Protect me," she begged through her tears. Adoni, initially just as confused as the other children, felt a sudden warmth in her little heart. It was the first time anyone had ever asked for her protection. Slowly, she wrapped her arms around the girl and held her close. "It's okay," she said soothingly. "You're safe here." As soon as those words left Adoni's lips, the girl's body went limp. She fainted, exhausted and overwhelmed, collapsing into Adoni's arms. Adoni held her even tighter, feeling a deep sense of responsibility and care for the girl, who now rested peacefully in her embrace. Over the next few days, the girl remained in the sick bay where the nurses at the orphanage took care of her. Each time she woke up in a panic, she would surprisingly relax as soon as she saw Adoni by her side and quickly drift back to sleep. The matron soon realized that Adoni played a crucial role in the girl's recovery, so she allowed Adoni to stay with her as long as needed. Adoni's meals, school notes, and any other responsibilities were brought to her so she could stay by the girl's side. Finally, one day, the girl woke up again, but this time she wasn't panicking. "Hello," she said softly to Adoni, who was reading a book nearby. Adoni quickly looked up and smiled at her. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice filled with excitement. The girl nodded, signaling that she was fine, and Adoni immediately went to call the nurses, who promptly came to attend to her. 2 days after the incident, the girl was discharged and the matron allowed her to become Adoni's roommate. "What's your name?" "I never asked," Adoni said to the girl. "Biola. My name is Biola," she replied. The two of them spent the rest of the day chatting. Biola shared with Adoni that her parents had died in a car crash. "Who was the woman that brought you here?" Adoni asked. "My mommy's sister," Biola answered. "She did not want me to stay with her. She always said she was too young to take care of me." Tears welled up in Biola's eyes again, and Adoni gently pulled her in for a warm embrace. Adoni felt deep sympathy for Biola, but what troubled her most was that she was about to be adopted. Her new parents were coming next week. And although they had only known each other for a short time, Adoni felt a strong connection with Biola. I can't leave my sister behind, she thought silently as they hugged. The next day, Adoni went to the matron's office with a proposal. Mama, Adoni said quietly, eyes full of hope. Is there any way they can take me and Biola together? The matron sighed and shook her head. She too had been worried about Biola's fate when Adoni left. My child, I don't think they would agree, but let me ask them, she finally said. The matron made a private call and returned with a sad expression. They only want you, Adoni, she said softly. Disheartened, Adoni went to their room, where Biola ran to hug her as soon as she entered. Where were you? I looked everywhere for you, Biola said, almost in tears. Her reaction made Adoni realize that Biola might not survive emotionally if she left her behind. So Adoni made a firm decision. Whoever adopted her had to take Biola too. She informed Biola of her choice and Biola immediately agreed. They made a pact that they would leave the orphanage together with the same parents. How it would happen was not their concern. The matron was not pleased with their decision, but she had no choice but to accept it. She could not force them to separate. 2 years passed, and the girls remained in the orphanage. Nobody came for Biola, but Adoni kept her word, turning down families who wanted to adopt only her. Many times, the matron would pull Adoni aside for a talk. My dear, I know you love your sister, but you're getting older. It's harder for older children to be adopted, she would say. But Adoni stood firm, and Biola was proud of her sister. Their bond only grew stronger. One day, a wealthy politician and his wife, Cecilia, visited the orphanage to make large donations of food and clothing. Biola was outside doing her chores when they arrived, and she greeted them cheerfully as they approached the building. Cecilia stopped and looked at her closely. You remind me of myself when I was little, she said kindly to Biola. The couple went inside to meet the matron, and about 10 minutes later, someone came to fetch Biola. The matron wants to see you right away, she was told, and Biola quickly responded. She entered the office and found the matron with the couple she had seen outside. Biola dear, the matron began. This lovely couple would like to adopt you, but I told them you would not leave without your sister. They wanted to hear from you directly. Biola was silent for a moment. No one had ever come to adopt her before. She had only heard stories of other children being adopted. She felt incredibly fortunate that the couple interested in her were wealthy. She thought back to the gifts from the car and the expensive SUVs they had arrived in. It felt like hitting the jackpot. I'll go with them, she blurted out suddenly. The matron was taken aback by her response. She asked again to be sure, and Biola repeated her answer several times. The couple was pleased. You'll be happy in our home, the politician and his wife assured her. Due to their influence, they left with Biola that same day. Biola refused to go inside to pack her things, not wanting to face Adoni because she did not know how to break the news to her. Later that evening, Adoni searched everywhere for Biola. Eventually, she went to the matron's office to ask about her sister. I've been looking everywhere for her, matron. I can't find her, she said, nearly in tears. The matron walked over and pulled Adoni into a tight embrace. I'm so sorry, Adoni. Biola was adopted today, she said sorrowfully. She could hardly believe that Biola had left Adoni behind. She carefully explained everything that had happened, and as she spoke, Adoni wept in her lap. Her heart was shattered. The betrayal was too much for her to bear. 12 years had passed, and Adoni was now 26. Life had not been kind to her. She was never adopted, and when she turned 21, she had to leave the orphanage because she was too old to remain there. Despite earning a degree in finance and accountancy, finding a job was a struggle, so she settled for work as a cleaner. Each day, she left her tiny self-contained apartment, took on odd jobs, and returned home exhausted. Life wasn't easy, but she tried her best to stay positive. One morning, Adoni received a call from the cleaning agency. "Hello, we need you for an urgent job. It's for a new client, and she will be moving in later this evening." Though tired, Adoni agreed to take the job because she needed the money. After picking up the key from the agency, she headed to the apartment to begin her work. The place was so luxurious. It was the kind of apartment you would only see in movies. As she cleaned, she could not help but marvel at the place. "I wonder if I'll ever live in a place like this," she thought to herself. Suddenly, she heard the door buzz, followed by footsteps. Her heart raced. The agency had said the tenant wouldn't arrive until the evening, and it was only 12:36 p.m. Adoni went out to the living room to see who it was. When she got there, it was a woman. "Hello," she said to the lady, whose back faced Adoni, and suddenly the woman jumped in fright, revealing her face. When Adoni set her eyes on her face, she almost fell in shock. "Biola!" she shouted in disbelief, her voice full of excitement. Despite the woman's elegant outfit and polished appearance, Adoni instantly recognized her younger sister. Biola too recognized Adoni, and they rushed into each other's arms, tears flowing as they embraced. "I'm so sorry, Adoni," Biola whispered through her tears, and Adoni only hugged her tighter. It did not matter what had happened in the past. She was just happy to see her sister again. They sat down together, and Adoni could not help but admire Biola. She was no longer the scared little girl from the orphanage. She had blossomed into a beautiful woman, her skin flawless, her scent sweet, and her speech refined. "Biola, you're so beautiful," Adoni exclaimed over and over, making Biola giggle every time. As they caught up, Adoni learned that Biola had earned a marketing degree from a prestigious university in the United Kingdom and had just returned to Lagos after landing a great job. "Wow, you've lived such an amazing life," Adoni said, smiling warmly. "God bless your parents." Biola looked at her older sister and felt a pang of guilt. It was clear that life had not been easy for Adoni, and part of her blamed herself. Then an idea struck her. "Adoni, just come live with me," Biola said, her voice soft but firm. "This place is too big for just me." Adoni smiled but shook her head. "If I move in here, I'll just be a burden. You need someone who can contribute to keeping this place, and I can't afford that." Biola would not take no for an answer. "I'm not asking for your money. If I need help, I can always ask my parents. I just want my sister to live with me, like we did back in the orphanage." Adoni was touched that despite their different circumstances, Biola still saw her as a sister. With tears in her eyes, she hugged Biola and said, "Okay, I will live here with you," she said, almost in tears. "Leave the affairs of the house to me. I will cook, clean, and do the laundry. Whatever you need, I will do it." But Biola laughed and said, "Adoni, you have not changed one bit. You always want to look after me." Everything happened swiftly after their conversation. Adoni began to live with Biola, and as she promised, she took charge of all the domestic duties. When Biola would object, she insisted on doing it because she did not want to be a nuisance to her. Every morning, she would cook and pack Biola's food so she would take it to the office, and when she was back, A hot meal would be waiting for her. But one morning, Adoni was in too much pain from menstrual cramps to get up and make Biola's lunch. However, Biola assured her it was fine. "Don't worry, I'll buy something on my way. Just get enough rest," she said as she left for work. Later in the day, when Adoni felt better, she decided to tidy up the house. While cleaning, she found Biola's bank card and panic set in. How will Biola buy food without this? She thought, knowing that Biola hated online banking. She figured Biola might not be able to eat until the evening. Without hesitation, Adoni quickly prepared a delicious meal, packed it up, and rushed to Biola's office. In about an hour, she arrived at Biola's office for the first time. Biola had pointed it out to her several times, but Adoni had never been inside. Clutching the food flask to her chest, she felt intimidated by the size of the office building. Slowly, she made her way to the reception area. "Hello," she greeted the receptionist. "I have a package for Biola Obaleke." The receptionist gave her a brief glance and asked if she had an appointment. Adoni shook her head shyly. The woman then asked for her full name, picked up the phone and dialed Biola's office. In a matter of minutes, Biola came running down. "My sister, I told you to rest. You did not have to come all this way," Biola said, embracing her. Adoni quickly handed the food flask to Biola. After a brief conversation, Biola returned to work and Adoni headed toward the elevator to leave. As she stood in front of the elevator, the doors opened. Inside the elevator was a handsome man in a finely tailored suit. He paused, taken aback by Adoni's natural beauty, which was rare and captivating. Although he had planned to exit the elevator, he decided to stay inside, hoping for a chance to speak to her. "Hello," he greeted as Adoni stepped in. She smiled and returned the greeting, remaining quiet and minding her own business. "Do you work here?" he asked, trying to strike up a conversation. Adoni smiled again. "Oh, no, I'm just here to bring lunch to my sister. You look like you work here though." He nodded. "I do. My name is Olamide. What's your name?" "Adoni," she replied as the elevator doors opened. They both stepped out together and Olamide asked for her number. Adoni, somewhat surprised, gave it to him. As she walked away, she thought, "A man like that will never call me. He probably just wanted to make conversation." Later that evening, while Adoni and Biola were having dinner, her phone rang. It was Olamide. Surprised, she excused herself from the table and answered the call. "Can we speak later? I'm having dinner with my sister," she said, blushing and still in disbelief that he had called. He agreed, and she returned to the table. Biola, noticing her blush, could not resist asking, "Who was that?" Adoni giggled shyly. "I met someone at your office, but I did not think he would actually call." Intrigued, Biola asked, "What's his name?" "His name is Olamide," Adoni replied. As soon as Biola heard the name, she almost choked on her food. "What does he look like?" she asked, trying to catch her breath. As Adoni began describing Olamide, Biola cut her off, exclaiming, "That's my chairman. He owns the company." Biola's heart sank, and a pang of jealousy surged through her. Olamide was one of Lagos's most eligible bachelors, and she had always admired him from afar. At work, she dressed her best and worked hard, hoping to catch his attention. Yet, he had never mixed business with pleasure. How could he notice someone as ordinary as Adoni? "Well, maybe he is looking for a cleaner," Biola said mockingly, but Adoni quickly clarified that she had never mentioned she offered cleaning services. "Be careful, Adoni," Biola said sharply. "Guys like him, they show off their money to play ladies." I'm not that type of girl, Adoni replied calmly, standing up to clear the table. Time passed, and not a day went by without Olamide calling Adoni. He was open about his feelings for her and made sure to show it in every possible way. He frequently showered her with gifts, took her on extravagant shopping trips, and even deposited large sums of money into her account. Adoni was truly living the baby girl lifestyle, and she often shared her experiences and gifts with Biola. However, Biola's responses were always laced with jealousy. Don't get carried away by all the money he's spending. It's nothing to him. He has plenty, Biola would say. Adoni would smile and respond, He's different, Biola. He has a kind heart. These words only fueled Biola's anger. Sometimes, she would intentionally give Adoni the silent treatment or make her feel uncomfortable at home. Whenever Adoni confronted her about it, Biola would dismiss her concerns, saying, It's all in your head. I'm just stressed from work. One day, Adoni decided to visit the orphanage to make a donation. She had always given what little she could, but now, thanks to Olamide's generosity, she was able to give more. She asked Biola to come along, and she agreed. When they arrived, the matron, now quite elderly, was delighted to see them. I can't believe you both found your way back to each other, she said warmly. Just then, there was a knock at the door. It was one of the volunteers at the orphanage. The matron introduced him as Aham, a handsome young man who was immediately struck by Adoni's beauty. As they conversed, he became even more drawn to her bright and cheerful personality. He had planned to ask for her contact information, but before he could, someone at the orphanage needed his help. By the time he returned, Adoni and Biola had already left. Back at home, Biola could not resist taking a jab at Adoni. Did you notice how that volunteer was practically drooling over you? That's the kind of man you should be with. Adoni looked at her, confused. What do you mean? He's your type, Adoni. Someone you can grow with. If you both work hard, maybe you can become millionaires together someday, Biola replied. Adoni just smiled, not fully understanding why Biola would say such things. She chose to overlook it to avoid starting a fight with her little sister. Adoni and Olamide's relationship grew stronger over time. Eventually, he proposed to her and naturally, she said yes. First, they did a court wedding and soon after, the preparation for their grand wedding party began. Adoni asked Biola to be her maid of honor and she agreed, but Biola made the process difficult. She was uncooperative with the wedding planner and it was a constant struggle for Adoni to get her to fulfill her duties. Despite the stress, Adoni pushed through. When the big day finally arrived, Biola could not believe Adoni was marrying the great Olamide, her Olamide. As the couple exchanged their vows, Biola silently cried, and those who noticed assumed she was moved by the love she witnessed. After the ceremony, everybody headed to the reception venue. In the dressing room, as Adoni prepared to change into her second outfit, she noticed Biola was distant and cold. Biola, what's wrong? Why are you upset? Adoni asked gently. Biola remained silent whilst helping her remove her veil and accessories, but Adoni kept probing. Please, talk to me. What's happening? Suddenly, Biola snapped. She threw the veil and accessories to the floor and let out a frustrated scream, grabbed her purse, and stormed out of the room. Shocked, Adoni chased after her, calling her name. But as she hurried down the stairs after Biola, she slipped, tumbling down and hitting her head hard on the tiled floor before blacking out. When Adoni finally opened her eyes, She found herself in a hospital bed. She had been in a coma for 2 weeks. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Olamide, who rushed to her side. "My love, you are weak," he said, his voice full of relief. But Adoni looked at him confused. I, I can't hear you," she mumbled. Olamide repeated himself, but her response stayed the same. Alarmed, he called the doctor, who came rushing in. After a thorough examination, the doctor sighed and turned to Olamide. "It seems the fall may have affected her hearing." Life after that was incredibly hard for Adoni. She spent most of her time in and out of the hospital, hoping the doctors could restore her hearing. Each time, she left disappointed. Whenever Olamide or anyone wanted to communicate with her, they had to send a text or write a note. She often noticed Olamide rolling his eyes in frustration, even though she tried to pretend she did not see it. He had even stopped joining her for appointments to the hospital. "I can't keep missing out on work," he wrote in a message to her. "Whatever finances that are needed will be taken care of." When Adoni read the message, she was sad, but there was nothing she could do. Biola, on the other hand, repeatedly apologized, explaining that she was heartbroken from a secret relationship with a potential suitor. Adoni forgave her as usual. She did not even mention to anyone that Biola was the reason for her fall that day. However, Biola had other plans. One day, she approached Olamide at work. "My sister needs me now. Let me move in with you both. I do not want her to face this without me," she told him, and Olamide instantly agreed. He was happy he would not have to share the burden alone. A deaf wife was not what he signed up for. Now, Biola moved in, but Adoni felt increasingly frustrated and alone. Every night, she cried herself to sleep, praying for a miracle. Despite having both her best friend and her husband living under the same roof, she had never felt more isolated. One day, during a routine hospital visit, her regular doctor was unavailable and a new doctor stepped in. To her surprise, it was Aham, the volunteer she had met at the orphanage some months back. He was equally shocked but saddened by her condition, having read through her case before seeing her. Regardless, he scribbled a note expressing his happiness to see her again. Then, they spent a long time catching up. It was the first conversation Adoni had truly enjoyed since her hearing loss. Before she left, Aham excused himself and came back with a book, handing it over to her. "Sign Language for Beginners," Adoni read out, and as she did, her heart sank, overwhelmed by the weight of her new reality. She had initially refused the book from the previous doctor, but maybe it was now time for her to accept her fate. "I'll help you. We can learn together," he wrote, and she nodded as tears flowed down her eyes. Aham went a step further and accompanied her to her appointment, sitting by her side while she spoke with the doctors. He was invested in Adoni getting her hearing back. Meanwhile, at home, Olamide and Biola grew closer. They had more personal conversations which advanced to flirting and eventually a full-blown affair. "I can't believe I ignored you at work all this time," Olamide would say to Biola, and she would respond, "As long as you realize your mistake, I am happy." They would even have romantic conversations in the same room as Adoni and sometimes mock her. She could not hear them, so there was no issue. But then, something changed. One evening, after a shower, Adoni slipped and hit her head hard on the bathroom floor. Pain surged through her, but she managed to crawl into bed. As she lay there, the pain gradually subsided, and finally, she drifted off to sleep. While she slept, She dreamt where a king was throwing a lavish party, and suddenly the king stood up from his throne and began walking through the crowd like he was in search of somebody. When he set his gaze on her, he held her hand, helping her to get up from her seat. Then he began to dance with her. As Adoni danced, she felt so much joy. It was unexplainable, and when she finally woke up, she kept laughing in joy. But suddenly, she jumped, frightened, because she heard her laughter. Though faint, she was sure she heard it. She laughed again, and she was right. Adoni began to converse with herself. She jumped in excitement because she was hearing her own voice. Excited but cautious, she decided not to tell Olamide or Biola just yet. I do not want to raise their hopes, she whispered to herself, jumping in joy at the sound of her own voice. Adoni immediately called Aham, who wasn't on duty that day, but rushed to meet her at the hospital when he heard the news. I'm so sorry. I know you're not on duty today, but I just had to tell somebody, she said to him. Adoni, can you really hear me? He asked her, and she nodded, tears coming down her eyes. Your voice is quite faint, but I can hear you, she answered, and they both began jumping like little kids in the hospital. This is hope, Adoni, he said, as they both jumped for joy. Next, the doctor examined her and confirmed her claims were indeed true. He smiled and said, Your hearing will be fully restored in about 9 months. Then he paused. This is a miracle, Adoni. It's one of those things science cannot explain. Adoni rushed home, eager to surprise Olamide and Biola with the news. That evening, as they returned from work, she stayed silent, planning to reveal her secrets during dinner. However, as soon as they thought she was not paying attention, Biola said to Olamide, She's so pathetic. What's with this ridiculous meal? Well, she's always been a bit clueless. I've never understood why she tries so hard. Adoni's hands trembled as she served them. She could not believe what she was hearing, but she chose to remain silent. Biola then added, Remember last night? Olamide shot her a warning glance. Not now, he muttered, his eyes darting toward Adoni. But Biola giggled. Last night was unforgettable. Adoni had heard enough. What happened last night? She asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Olamide and Biola froze, shocked. Have you two been sleeping together? She demanded, tears streaming down her face. Immediately, Olamide fell to his knees, begging for forgiveness, while Biola stood there fuming. Why does he always choose her? She thought angrily. Devastated, Adoni ran out of the house, heading straight to the orphanage where she had grown up. The matron welcomed her with open arms, comforting her as she had done years ago when Biola was adopted. Through tears, Adoni explained everything, and the matron cried with her. It's the second time she's betraying me, Adoni said in agony. In the weeks that followed, Adoni filed for divorce, but Olamide refused, claiming he would do anything to win her back. Furious, Biola plotted to trap him by getting pregnant. One evening, she visited his home and spiked his drink with sleeping drugs, but instead of putting him to sleep, the concoction reacted with a medication he was already using, leading to a heart attack. Panicking, Biola tried to flee, but the house's security team noticed something was wrong. When they checked on Olamide, they found him lifeless. Immediately, the police were alerted and she was arrested and charged with his death. A few days after Olamide's tragic passing, Adoni was still in shock. Though she had wanted a divorce, she never imagined things would end this way. One morning, A lawyer arrived at her doorstep, informing her that Olamide had transferred all his assets and properties to her after their court wedding. She remembered Olamide would always tell her, "All my money belongs to you. Just for being this beautiful, you can have it all." And they would both laugh when he said it. But Adoni never took him seriously. Sitting on the couch, with several property documents on the table, Adoni reflected on how far she had come. After the burial, she decided to travel and see the world. On the day of her departure, Aham accompanied her to the airport. "I like you, Adoni. I always have. But I know it's too soon, and your heart still needs to heal. I pray to God that when you are ready to open your heart to love again, you will consider me," he said to her. Adoni blushed, feeling the same, but for the first time, she wanted to put herself first. "I'll keep in touch, Aham," she said, hugging him again. Then, she turned away from him, heading towards the boarding gate to catch her flight. Thank you for listening to this story today. As usual, I will give you an opportunity to tell me what you have learned. And if you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share with your loved ones. Till next time. Bye.